Hello, and again, welcome to BitDev. I'm Santiago Ramones. Across from me is...
Peter Kozodoy.
Thank you. One, thank you for saying your name out loud so that people know how to pronounce it, but also, thank you for doing this with me.
Of course.
So first of all, as always, who are you? What do you do?
Yeah, so we already covered the name part. Everyone pronounces my last name incorrectly. It's Kozodoy. I get Koday, Kodoze, Kodozi. I've had people say it backwards. It's not that hard. And so, I'm sort of a self-described Renaissance man because I'm technically an entrepreneur. I start and grow companies. But every time I say that, I think people in the back of their minds are like, oh, that means he's broke. Poor guy. I've grown my platform company. I grew that to the multi-million-dollar level. We had offices across the U.S. and here in the U.S. and in Canada. Got on the Inc. 5000 list of fastest growing companies in the U.S. for a couple of years in a row, and then branched out and did other projects because I have entrepreneurial ADHD. So I'm involved in real estate. My business partner at the agency and I have a tech launch. And I do now a tremendous amount of coaching and consulting for other entrepreneurs, helping them understand how to even build a 7 or 8 figure business and how to build, more importantly, a lifestyle around that business. Because so often entrepreneurs get caught up in what the world tells them success looks like, or they try to build a big company on, I liken it to a skyscraper. They're trying to build a skyscraper on the foundation of a 2-family home and then wondering why that doesn't work, right? So, I love doing all that kind of deep work with folks and helping them understand, to my book topic about honesty, how their own self-limiting bullshit is getting in the way of them building a business, which, Santiago, is the case all the time. 99% of business problems are personal problems in disguise, which is something I never would have figured out or believed if you had told it to me. I had to experience it and meet the brick wall of humility many times to even figure it out myself. So since then, I've branched out, and my big project this year, coming out in exactly a month from right now, is my new book, Honest to Greatness: How Today's Greatest Leaders Use Brutal Honesty to Achieve Massive Success, which was just endorsed by Barbara Corcoran. Very exciting. So looking forward to that coming live.
Sweet. Okay. Well, one thing that is kind of unrelated to the things that you just said, I read your website bio. You started in figure skating?
I did. Yeah, I was a figure skater. I was a very competitive figure skater as a child. Bless my parents, they put me into everything when I was a kid. I was a figure skater. I'm actually as good of a skier as I am a figure skater. We were in musical theater. We were in swimming classes. We could do it, which was fantastic because it gave me the ability to try a bunch of things, have a lot of different social groups, which, looking back on it, I can see why that was important. I wasn't always particularly popular in school, and it was less of a big deal because I had these other social groups that I was a part of. I could be popular over here, and if I wasn't there. And I think looking back, that was an important part of my childhood. But I was a very serious figure skater. I tell the story at 17, I knew 2 things to be true. The first is I was going to the Olympics as a figure skater. I was very serious about it. I trained for almost 2 decades. And the other thing I was sure of is that I was going to Harvard as an undergrad. Several of my family members had gone to Harvard, and I grew up south of Boston. There was no other college but Harvard, right? I just didn't even look past it. And by 18, sadly, I had to have my own, confrontation of honesty when it was clear I was not going to make the Olympics. I just wasn't good enough. I could not hold my nerves together for one reason or another. Mind you, now I do a lot of keynote talks and presentations and stuff like that. But I will tell you that after you fall on your ass alone on the cold ice in front of 2,000 people, nothing is difficult after that. It all gets easier. But so, that was, failure number 1, I realized at 18. And number 2 was, I applied to Harvard. Harvard sent me a nice letter back saying, thank you, but no thank you. Please don't contact us again. So that was the first time I had to really confront that I was derailed from the life I always thought I would live. I've learned that term is cognitive dissonance. I was so convinced that this is what life was going to look like, and then when it didn't happen, I think I spent a lot of years sort of assuming a second best scenario. I'm not going to be number one kick-ass Peter, it looks like I'm going to be, second place Peter. Awesome. Right. Now the good news, Santiago, is those fueled my company because I had these big chips on my shoulder. And then in a way, it made me want to prove to others, and especially, of course, to myself, that that I could reach some pinnacle of success, however I defined it at the time. So, again, looking back, hindsight, wonderful gift. I can see that those things have now defined in a beneficial way, who I am and who I've become.
Right. Yeah. So, how do you go from there into starting businesses, starting in marketing? Why go from this thing to that thing?
Yeah. Life, right? One point I love to make when I'm speaking to entrepreneur groups, I just did a presentation a couple of weeks ago to an entrepreneur conference. And the first thing I opened with was, I need you all to understand the role that luck plays in life. Now, we can debate, we can make our own luck, or can we put ourselves in position to be lucky? Yes, I believe all those things are true. But I also think no one can discount the right place and the right time and the right people, the power that has over us. And that, by the way, we have no control over, right? So I'm an undergrad, I ended up at Brandeis outside of Boston. And I'm every single elective class I can take, I'm at the business school, because I just loved business. It made sense to me. I was like, oh, this is how the world works. I want to understand it better. And at the time, I was working for my now business partner, who at the time owned retail figure skating stores. Because again, we knew the industry well, so I'd worked in it, as a teenager. My parents were like, "Hey, yeah, we're going to support you in all this stuff. By the way, go get a job, you bum." And so I did. It was fine. So as I'm taking all these business classes, I'm like, we're learning about all this awesome stuff. This industry is the perfect kind of niche industry. There are no big players. Let's expand, nationwide and whatever. And he was like, "Yeah, sounds great. Move to Connecticut and let's do that." Now, talk about luck or misluck and timing. Turns out that as I graduate, it's 2008, and you know what happened then, and credit markets dry up and inventories shrink back, and we don't have the freedom and flexibility that we had. So being the two geniuses that we are, we said to ourselves, all right, well, we've got these figure skating stores. We need to drum up business, obviously. What's the best, clearest, most obvious way to do that? I know. Create a reality television show about figure skating. That was our logical idea. Yeah. So we put together teams of video producers, lighting people, and all that, venue, and we shoot this pilot for a reality television show about figure skating, because we saw Dancing with the Stars, and we were like, well, nobody gives a shit about ballroom dancing. What the hell? Meanwhile, figure skating, the most watched Olympic sport at every Winter Olympics by far. So we're like, there's a market for this. By the way, you do not have to shoot a pilot to go pitch a TV show. That we had no idea why we did that. And as we're pitching, producers are like, oh yeah, that's interesting. I don't think anybody cares about figure skating though. And we're like, ballroom dancing? Are you kidding me? Anyway.
Right.
So we go tens of thousands of dollars into debt producing this pilot. And then we're like, okay, well that didn't work. It probably wasn't that smart. Maybe we should be real entrepreneurs and go make money, do something and make $1 or $2. So while we had these teams pulled together, we said, let's go pitch video production work. And so Santiago, literally, when I say we started at the bottom, we started at the bottom. We started shooting $800 television commercials for local car dealers, which is exactly as glamorous as it sounds. And literally we bounced along the bottom for years, and by year 4, we had gotten up to maybe 350,000 in revenue. And we're doing all this video production work. I just remember thinking to myself, man, if we could only get more of these $800 television commercials, we'd be rich. Well, apparently, even though I was taking business classes, I didn't take math classes. So I didn't pause to figure out that's actually a really stupid idea. And, what kind of business would that be, right? It doesn't even make sense. Talk about foundation, as I said earlier. This is how I learned all this stuff, by the way, the hard way, by doing stupid shit. So we were getting hired by other agencies to do their video production work. And quickly we realized that marketing agencies are run by a lot of dum-dums. I mean, people the strategies are bad. They didn't care about clients. They would overcharge. They would blow through deadlines. We were like, we can do that better, right? Classic entrepreneur, we could do that, right? The good thing about we can do that is, it's good to have that ego. That's what helps us business owners, get going. The bad thing is we actually have to go out and prove it.
Right.
So overnight, we're like, well, we're not video production anymore. We're a full service marketing agency. Change the name. That's who we are. And at the time, we were doing TV commercials, actually web videos, for a local college, shooting their student, testimonials, stuff like that. And one day the VP of marketing calls. She says, actually, we're going to hire a full service agency now. It's like, over $1 million account, big deal. She's like, I like you guys. Do you want to come in and pitch? Do you have the resources and the team to do this? So we kind of put that on pause, and we were like, all right, well, okay. Do we have like copywriters? No. Do we have graphic designers? Nope, don't have that. Media people to handle the meeting? Nope, don't have media people. Do we have an account man? Nope, no account managers. Don't have any of those things that we knew we needed. So we got back on the phone. We're like, yeah, absolutely. We want to pitch. We've got everything you need. We'll be there. Just give us the time. We're good to go. So we're at the pitch, and at the end of the presentation, we show this video of all their students talking about the college and their experience and how they saw, that particular organization. And using that, we reveal our tagline. It's going to be the cornerstone of the whole campaign. And the room goes silent. And the president just like drops her head and is looking at the presentation. And it's one of those boardrooms where like no one's opinion matters except the leader. Like they're all looking at her like, oh, what is she going to say? Because whatever she says, I'll say, boardroom bullshit. We'll get into that later. And room goes quiet. I'm looking around for the exits. I'm like, all right, I need a fucking exit plan here. And she snaps back up a couple moments later and says, where did you get this? I've been looking for this for years. And I was tempted to say, well, because we're the biggest bunch of geniuses you've ever met. That's why. But that would have been dishonest. That wasn't the case. We said, we didn't come up with this. Your students came up with this. Because if we're going to be honest about whose opinion matters most, it's theirs. They're the ones who need to tell you who you are, which is a theme that, I've carried forward, and we've worked in a lot of clients, helping them understand that should be obvious. It's not. And we use that. So we won that pitch, won that client. We use that as a cornerstone of more clients. And from there, we've worked with startups to the Fortune 500 and even Warren Buffett himself. I accidentally served as Warren Buffett's bodyguard once. That's another story. But yeah, it's been a wild ride and one with many pivots and many lessons and many downfalls and defeats. Trust me.
Sure. So then at what point do you start kind of figuring out the flow and you have that upward motion that has kind of always been the goal? Yeah. And how do you kind of figure out that goal or the way of getting it?
I'll let you know when I figure it out, Santiago. How's that? No. So, I mean, we did something, talk about serendipity and luck, right? And originally my team hated when I would talk about this, but we grew a multi-million-dollar operation through referrals, through warm networking, through, mothers, daughters, dogs, aunts, nephew, so-and-so, which was wonderful. And by the way, it taught me that is no way to build a multi-million-dollar business because it's too unpredictable. So, fast forward to a few years later, we were doing well. Overnight, $1 million client decides they don't want to work with an agency anymore. They're going to bring it in-house. We lost $1 million in revenue overnight and had to do our first layoff. And that was like devastating. Yeah. And we didn't have, a predictable sales pipeline to back it up. We had to learn. Now I can tell you, I have 63 leads in the pipeline because we've built a system around it finally. But we didn't talk about the things you don't know, blind sides, biases, right? Ego. Oh, yeah. We got this. We didn't have this. I didn't have this. But interestingly, what that taught me, Santiago, is that I always thought success looked like offices and employees and clients around the world and just like, big, better stuff, right? Turns out I hated all of that. I don't even like managing big teams of people. Like turns out I'd much rather just like sit in my beach house on my laptop with no pants on and just like do my job. And, talk to people over Zoom like this. Like, I love this, right? All about the work from totally home. Good to know about me, but I had to struggle through like, wait a second, but I had success. This is what success looks like, isn't it? Like, why isn't this making me happy? And what I wish for myself was that someone could have told me that in my mid-20s and that I would have believed them. But sadly, Santiago, I wouldn't have. I wouldn't have believed you even if you had told me. Like, Peter, you're not actually going to like, it's not what success means. It's a different thing. I would have been like, yeah, well, fuck you. Like, what are you talking about? Look at, these Fortune 500 companies. Isn't that awesome? And those CEOs are so cool. You couldn't pay me to go run a company like that. They don't own their schedule. I know that now, right? Wisdom, honesty, brutal honesty. So yeah.
Well, yeah. So what are the usual trends that you find in companies that you're consulting? And it's like, man, it feels like every day I'm saying the same thing to every different company.
Yeah, sadly, and again, this is something that I wish Brandeis had prepared me for. I actually, after I built $1 million company, went back to Columbia to get an MBA. Fantastic, by the way. Amazing how stupid I was and how much I learned and how incredible my classmates are. But neither at Brandeis nor at Columbia did any business professor prepare me for what I found in the boardrooms of businesses. Because while we studied the logic and sense of finance and spreadsheets and marketing programs and all this stuff, right? It's all very logical, drops down to the bottom line, literally. No one prepared me for the fact that the business world does not operate that way. It operates on ego and bias and disillusionment and politics and infighting.
Yeah.
So for years, and by the way, I thought I was crazy until I went to Columbia and we studied Warren Buffett, because Warren Buffett went to Columbia too. And we learned about value investing and all the things he pioneered. Not that he pioneered, but he made it, famous and palatable to the masses. Turns out he has a name for this. It's called the institutional imperative. He too describes in one of his books how he came out of Columbia and was like, oh, this is going to be awesome. And then started, engaging in all these boardrooms. And he was like, what the hell is this?
Yeah.
And he developed a name for it called the institutional imperative, which is the idea that the institution just gets sort of catapulted forward in a completely illogical way by people that can't get their heads out of their own asses. And that was great for me because I was like, okay, I'm not crazy. And what would happen, Santiago, is we'd engage with these clients, startups of the Fortune 500. In fact, the bigger ones are sometimes the worst. And some of them we would give love, care, attention, strategy, and they would just crush it. They'd get like a 5-6 times ROI on their spend with us. They'd stay with us for years. It was just like fantastic. Others, same love, care, attention, strategy, and they would blow up in the launch pad. I mean, they could not get out of their own way to save their lives. And we just descend into politics and infighting and ego and irrationalism, right? And I couldn't figure it out. It pissed me off. And I chalked it up to stupidity. I was like, these people are a bunch of morons. That was my own stupidity. That's not true. Any executive that becomes an executive has to be smart. What I now know to be true, and of course, what do I know, right? What I now believe is true, and I write about this in my book and in my TEDx talk, is that executives grow to be fundamentally dishonest. And I don't mean that in they're like outright trying to mislead people. What I mean is they are dishonest either about, and I talk about these levels in my book, what's going on in what I call the community, how society is changing, how consumer trends are shifting, how the zeitgeist is moving. Or they're dishonest about what the others around them are thinking and feeling and knowing, either the insights of their fellow executives that they won't listen to, or what their customers are saying about their products and services that they refuse to believe. And then finally, they're fundamentally dishonest with and about themselves, with their own biases and self-limiting beliefs as leaders. And what I hope, and what I've kind of transitioned to, we still, work at GEM, my agency, but I'm also with this book hoping to come up a level so that we're not inheriting someone's idea of marketing where what they really need is a boardroom readjustment, a chiropractic, honest alignment into what's true about their business, because it was just frustrating to not be able to work at the level that really mattered, helping these executives understand that they're full of shit. And that's actually what's preventing them from moving forward. Now, as you can imagine, some are going to be more receptive than that to others. But just to give you, a wild example, I never would have believed these things if I saw them. I can't tell you how many times a customer insisted on a marketing program that served themselves, the CEO, the leader, whoever the decision maker was, even if they had zero to do with their target market. We would get in conversations that are like, I think we should have this kind of messaging in our AdWords and our display ads and our Facebook ads. Okay, that's great, but your customers already said that they don't care about any of those things. So if you want to talk about those things, it's fine. Yeah, I want to talk about those things. Okay.
Yeah.
Or, hey, we should do billboards. I don't think that's a good idea. Your target market's not driving on the highways. I don't care about billboards. No, we should do it. Okay, that's a $7,000 ad placement. Can you tell us why? Well, I think it's a good idea. And I want this one here on that highway. Why there? That's nowhere near your, where your target market would be going. Yeah, well, it's halfway between my house and work, and I like to see it. Okay, fine. If we're going to spend $7,000 a month on your ego, that's totally cool, but let's not delude ourselves about what this is, right?
Yeah.
And by the way, when this fails, which it will, don't blame us. Guess what, Santiago? They blamed us every time for their own ego and bias, right?
Sure.
And it pissed me off. So, that's why I wrote a book about it. And actually, I didn't, great thing about being the honesty guy is I get to be honest, right?
Sure.
Never set out, honestly, to write about, speak about, or frankly, even care about honesty. This is a shock to, teenage to mid-20s Peter, who is likely most likely voted to continue being an asshole through his life. And for me to talk about honesty and transparency and humility and the removal of ego should be shocking to anybody who knew younger me. But what I figured out is that it works. And I originally set out to write a marketing book because of all the frustrations I experienced. It was actually my literary agent who, as soon as he signed me, he turned around and was like, oh, hey, Peter, by the way, this isn't a book about marketing. It's a book about honesty. And I said, well, clearly you can't read because it says right on the front cover, it's a book about marketing. So I don't know what to tell you. And, of course, as I took it home and I was flipping through it, I was like, damn, he's absolutely right. This is much bigger. This is about how honesty invades and dishonesty invades us as a society. We see that with the pandemic, and racism, and gender discrimination, all the shit going on right now. We see it in how we lie to ourselves, not intentionally, but about what it takes to achieve what we want, who we really are, what we even want to achieve, what it takes to get there. All these ways that honesty comes into our lives and businesses, it affects us as leaders of our own personal lives or leaders of our organizations, and ultimately does affect the results we achieve, whether that's our bottom line, in terms of monetary, bottom line, or our happiness, satisfaction, fulfillment, whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think of the phrase, like, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink.
Indeed.
How do you get the horse to drink?
Yeah,
because you can berate these people with all these honesties and everything, but yeah.
I mean, one thing I do in my book is I make the case over and over and over again. And I have some fantastic interviews and case studies, from Quicken Loans to Domino's Pizza to Bridgewater Associates to the Ritz-Carlton, to all these organizations that have used honesty as a strategy to make shit tons of money. This is not an ethics book, by the way. This is a book about using honesty, wielding it like a tool in your toolkit to make money. I'm a capitalist, right? MBA. So, really, I want people to understand this is about achieving outcomes. But to your point, a conversation I've had a couple of times is like, well, isn't this sort of like selection bias? Because folks who are more likely to be open-minded and willing to admit fault and ready for change, all the ways I define honesty in the book, are going to be the ones who are more likely to read it. And the folks who think they have it all figured out, who are overrun by ego, who swear up and down they're self-aware, even though that's usually a symbol that they're the least self-aware in the room, they're not going to pick up a book about honesty because they already think they're honest. And that would be a very correct assumption to make. The folks who should read this probably won't. And my hope, because I stratify the book into layers, and I have a chapter just for entrepreneurs, just for leaders of big companies, also just for middle managers and frontline employees, because my hope is that someone in an organization picks it up and says, hey, there's real strategy here. There's real tactics. We can do this and we can make more money, because everyone wants to make more money, right? Except for maybe like the monks in the Himalayas. But this podcast is probably not for them, right? So, that's why it's a business book. There's a reason to use these strategies, and I show you how to use them in the book. And the reason why I think it's extremely important, and I was really intent on creating chapters for middle managers and frontline employees, is because particularly frontline employees, they know the truth. They are the ones who actually know what's going on. They know what the customers are really saying. 9 times out of 10, Santiago, they have all the answers that the executives need. It's just that the executives don't ask them. And even when they do ask them, they shovel it under the rug and they don't do anything about it. Listen, I went into, so we've done a ton of focus groups and interviews for clients. One time we got hired by an organization. They're like, yeah, come in. We want everyone to get on the same page. We want to know what our frontline people are thinking. We need to solve this big problem, right? The one thing they do is provide this one system to clients, and the system produces a benefit the clients love. They have a ton of clients, and they want it to be better, right? Great, right? Awesome. So I'm doing this this focus group with like 20 of their people. Inside of 90 minutes, we had a fantastic plan put together. They knew what to do. They had already researched it. They knew how to upgrade the system. They knew what the clients wanted, like done, right? I was like, no, this is perfect. You did all my work for me. Fantastic. Take it back to the executives. And what do you think they say?
Don't like it.
Oh gosh, this seems really expensive, Peter. I don't know. And, I see that our people are saying that, but I don't really believe that. And yeah, you're right. They just got in a room and lied for what reason again? So, here they are paying us money to bring them a solution. We brought them a solution. They still didn't want to believe it. So, right. and in the meeting, by the way, the frontline employees did say at one point, Peter, this is great. I'm happy they're asking our opinion, but I have a feeling they're going to ask and then not doing anything about it. And all I could think to myself is, wow, what a trust eroding exercise that is.
Sure.
I ask you for your opinion and then do absolutely nothing. That's even worse. You may as well just tell them, hey, please just shut up and do your job. I actually don't care about your opinion. I just want to make sure we're on the same page and transparent about that. That would actually be better.
Right. Yeah. So then you talk about luck and I guess I'm trying to formulate the sentence backwards. How do you help people break through barriers and systems, bureaucracies, and the like that are kind of always there? And I don't know if some of it is luck or if some of it is just navigating the systems.
Yeah. So there are definite ways to gain traction, and it changes depending on who you are. If you're a leader of an organization, you can just come right out and say, hey folks, I think I've probably been a lying sack of shit in some way or another, and I'm sorry. And I want this organization to be better. I want to be better. I want to be better for you. So here's what we're going to do. And I outline things in my book like, create a culture code, and not for the sake of culture, but for the sake of transparency.
Sure.
You look at a company like Quicken Loans, they have what are called isms. And it's basically a culture code. This is how we act and this is what we believe. They have isms like say yes before no, or it's not about who is right, it's about what is right. So when I first started investigating Quicken, what I wanted to know is how did they ever come up with Rocket Mortgage when they were competing against much bigger publicly traded mortgage providers like Wells Fargo and Bank of America and all that stuff. They create Rocket Mortgage, steal the whole market, number one mortgage provider, right? As I investigated and I talked to their CEO, Jay Farner, as they were talking and introducing me to the isms and the types of things they believe, I ended up saying to myself, the question really is, how could they not have invented Rocket Mortgage? It was always going to be them. Because when someone, first of all, when someone was like, hey guys, we all have a smartphone, and why don't we just get mortgages through the phone? Because killing a tree every time we want to get a mortgage is kind of stupid. There probably is a better way. And because of Quicken, Quicken doesn't have gatekeepers. Their managers are, well, we say yes before no. And that seems like a good idea. Could work. Why don't you go do it and let me know how it goes? That's their attitude. I call it the executive mirror. It's the new role that executives must play in organizations, which is that they just take in information from the front line to the managers up to the executives, ask themselves, does this fit with our overall strategy, with what we're trying to do? In Quicken's case, does this help people get mortgages? Yes. And in that case, their job is to just be a mirror, to reflect it back out and say, great, let's go try it. See how that works.
Yeah.
Right? And every organization would say, we want to be entrepreneurial, but then they put all these gatekeepers in the way of doing exactly that. Entrepreneurial is, we say yes before no, because we don't know. We have no idea if people want to get mortgages through their phone. So let's go test it and find out. And they did, and rest is history, right? Yeah. So to circle back, if you're a top-down leader, you can institute rules like that. And by the way, stick to them, because when you don't, you create mistrust, right? That's the worst. We see our core, I've worked in so many companies. Oh, there are our core values. Yeah, our core values are Awesome. This core value is that you move fast, but that employee had a great idea 5 weeks ago and it sat on the desk. So how fast do you move? And I hate that, and everyone knows the truth, right? That's what we have to remember. We live in a very transparent society. We know things. We can look them up. People can use my Google password, Google all day long, right? Now, if you're, say, a middle manager or frontline employee, there's a whole different tack that you want to take, right? One of the things I encourage is to find a scapegoat. Honestly, bringing me in to blame me is a fantastic way to remove risk from yourself. Just think about it. Be like, oh, well, I didn't say any of those things. I mean, honesty might work for our organization. I don't know, but this guy, Peter, says it will. And, he came in, made that speech, and I don't know. I mean, yeah, maybe he sucks or maybe not, but why don't we try it? Because it'll be his fault, right? Because especially in a big company, it's all about protectionism. As my business partner says, most folks in companies are not playing to win. They're playing to not lose. By the way, in my opinion, what a shitty way to live. I think I'd rather die. So my point is there are things like, hey, bring in a scapegoat, point to them, right? Take the risk off yourself so you don't lose your job. Secondly, build a coalition. Build a cross-departmental group of folks who recognize that the organization could really use a lot more honesty, about what's going on in the world, what's going on with their customers, vendors, suppliers, fellow peers, and what's going on with themselves as an organization, and get together to do some really good brainstorming activities. So do some exploration, create some surveys. I have a whole workshop that I run as part of my book, and I actually give you all the workshop questions at peterkozodoy.com. If you opt in for the 21-question honesty quiz, it's totally free, and you get the workbook guide, and you can follow along with your team. Another thing is get data. So with Buffett's institutional imperative, one of the things he found was that CEOs love to do this really weird thing. How am I going to innovate and beat the competition? Ooh, I know. Let's see what the competition's doing and just do that. This boggles my mind, and I've seen it over and over and over again, right? This sort of odd copycat syndrome. Now, the good thing is, if you're a smart frontline employee who wants to use strategic honesty to make a name for themselves and to help their organization, they can actually use that copycat inclination against the CEO by pointing to organizations and lists like the Just 100. Just Capital puts out a list showing, here are the most honest, they call them just companies, according to, workers' rights and ESG and environmental and all this stuff. And by the way, they earn an average of, I think it's 6 or 8% higher return on equity than their peers who don't use those strategies. So you can use data to make a business case, or you can use any of the case studies in my book to show how using strategic honesty works. And then ask the question, hey, if it worked for all of them, maybe we're missing something here, a way to make you more money, Mrs. or Mr. Executive. So using data is really important. If they can see it in a chart and it aligns with what they're trying to do and with the bottom line, again, it becomes harder to ignore. And as one of the CEOs in my book says, if you bring a coalition of people together who agree that, great change and innovation is the right way to go, and they bring data, and the leader still wants to ignore you, it may be time to go to monster.com and switch jobs, or not. But, that's who wants to work in that environment, spend their days like that? I don't know. Don't ask me. I've never, I haven't worked for someone since I was 22. So.
Yeah, no, that's really good. Kind of more about you, but what's something that people don't normally know about you?
I'm so brutally hard on myself. I coach and mentor a lot of entrepreneurs now, and they're always surprised. I guess I put on a good face, but they're always surprised to hear how hard on myself I am, the level of expectation I have for my own achievement. So, gosh, Santiago, there are days when I wake up and I dread facing the day, even with all the stuff I've done, just kind of knowing the big hill I still have yet to climb. So, one of the things that I hope all entrepreneurs recognize is that two things. One, business success does not equal personal success or happiness. Those two things are not related and should not be related because it's a recipe for disaster. And two, if you're in the Rocky Mountains and you climb one mountain, what do you see?
Everything else, I guess.
more mountains, right?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
There's always another one over the horizon. So it's not like they go away. You know, so often I find entrepreneurs I start to work with are like, if I can just get to, 700,000 in sales or 1.5 in sales. And I'm like, great. By the way, once you do that, you're going to have some of these same problems. You're going to have more new problems. You're going to so let's dissociate where you're trying to go in business from, once I get there, I will be fill in the blank, happy, successful, whatever. Like that's not true. That's not honest. So yeah, I've had to learn that the hard way.
Yeah. You kind of answered this one anyways, but what advice do you have for people starting out, entrepreneurs, business leaders, whatever?
Get help. Don't try to do it alone. I mean, I've wasted years and millions of dollars, and I should have gotten help so early in the process, because people would have told me, like, I had to learn, we're only going to get so far as a video production company. We need to be a full service agency. Then I realized, full service agencies, that's not a particularly sellable business. They don't get a big multiple when they sell. Nobody told me that when I was in my 20s, right? So I could have spent all that time building like a marketing tech company, and I'd be a lot more wealthy now. But I didn't have that guidance because I didn't ask, because I was too stupid to ask, right? Too big of an ego. So get a mentor. Oh my gosh. I mean, and what's, again, I don't know, Santiago, if you had said to 25-year-old Peter, hey, spend $10,000 with this person so they can help you build the right kind of business, I probably wouldn't have done it, because I was too stupid and too egotistical. Probably been like, that's a lot of money. By the way, they would have saved me literally millions of dollars, and a lot of headaches and heartaches. So that's something I've had to learn the hard way. Do not go it alone. That's just silly. You don't have to do it.
Yeah. No, that's great. Switching gears, and there's no good way to transition into it. What is the role of spirituality or religion in your life?
Yeah, it's a great question. I grew up celebrating everything with presents, which is, I think, a wonderful way to grow up if you like presents, which I do. Everyone likes a good gift. I was bar mitzvahed. I ended up at Brandeis, not terribly religious. And I have some issues with structured religion. I actually write about in my book ancient Egypt and what the Amun priests did early on. I'll tell you that story in a moment. And then what the Catholic Church did in Rome and the early Renaissance. And there's so many instances, I think, of structured religion taking advantage of people, taking advantage of people's fears. I have some reservations about that. So I'll tell you a quick story, and then we'll get into how I've kind of solved that spirituality wise. But imagine you're in ancient Egypt, right? You come out of the market and you're momentarily blinded by the hot desert sun, and you trip and go ass over tea kettle down these stone steps, and you crack your noggin open at the bottom, right? Upon death, you would instantly be transported to the Hall of Two Truths. Do you know this?
I don't.
Okay. Ancient Egyptian mythology. And in the Hall of Two Truths, there would be a scale. And on one end of the scale would be your heart, your live, like beating cardiac organ. And on the other end would be the feather of Ma'at, the feather of truth, is the goddess of truth. And the idea would be, you don't want the heart to weighed to be heavier than the feather. You want that to be in balance. And that was a symbol that you had led a good life. That you were a respectful, honorable person, treated others well, and so on and so forth. And if it balanced, you'd be entered into the afterlife, which for ancient Egypt was a really big deal. And if it didn't, if your heart was heavier than the feather, then your heart would be devoured by the part crocodile god Amit, and then you would cease to exist and no afterlife for you. So this seems, and we have a lot of these stories about, spirituality and religion trying to keep society in check and behave like, good citizens, right? Which is wonderful, except that the Amun priests got wise to this, and they started to say to some wealthy patrons, hey, look, why take the risk? We have these scrolls here that we can, just sort of fill out your name, these incantations that'll help you skip the lines, kind of like a Disney fast pass for the afterlife. You just, give us a couple shekels, then we'll give you the scroll and you can be on your way. And so the reason why that moment's important for the story of honesty is because those moments are the ones in which we've perverted money and morality. We've confused the two, given people an out saying you can do anything you want to accumulate wealth, and then you can make up for it later. And religion after religion, culture after culture has done this. I think that's getting harder now for a couple different reasons. One, a lot more science, a lot more structured religion and belief in, mass belief in the afterlife, right? Maybe I'm wrong, but particularly among the millennial generation, seems like that's sort of fallen by the wayside. The other is we know too much. We know what structured religion looks like and what it does. And, think about, all the crises the Catholic Church has been through as a for instance, but they're, none of the other religions are immune. I'm not picking on them. And, I think we've kind of gotten wise to like, people can take advantage of us for money. And by the way, now we know that because everyone takes to Facebook and talks about it and it's on the news and it's everywhere in the world, right? There's so much transparency. And that's the main premise of the book, is that like in a culture that we now live in, that is a newly transparent society where everyone's walking around with a smartphone, where everything's being recorded somewhere, it's not going to pay going forward to do anything but be honest and transparent. And we're already starting to see that with all the corporate scandals that are coming to light, and then folks saying, well, screw them, I'm not going to spend my money with them. If they're going to behave like that, that's going to happen more and more. So how I've solved that in my own life, Santiago, is by diving deeply into personal development and into my core values. And I've gotten, particularly after my own crisis of honesty at 30, I've gotten myself into really good situations that I've been able to explore, what are my real values? I talk about in the book, creating a values hierarchy, not just the values that represent you and that you really believe, but in what order they are. You may be surprised to hear that honesty is on my values hierarchy, but it's actually not anywhere near the top values. There are values I hold even more than honesty, like service to others and enlightenment, which is like my top value, which is this idea of being in complete control over what I'm thinking, what I'm feeling, how I'm reacting. And that comes from getting deeply honest with myself, about what my triggers are, getting deeply honest with myself about where I allow my logical brain to take over versus my emotional brain, getting myself out of environments, out of relationships, out of, situations in which I don't react or act in an enlightened way, as I've sort of defined that. And that's how I've allowed, a measure of spirituality to enter into where I am. And of course, one of my top values being service, to others, that of course plays into what I consider to be my spirituality as well. I'm always looking to ensure others are comfortable, others are validated. Those have been things I've needed to learn. I didn't give a shit about people's feelings or validating what they thought. I was too busy telling everyone that they were a dumbass and what they said made no sense. Whether that's true or not, and usually it is, I'm just going to throw it out there. I've learned that doesn't matter, right? What's important to people is that I leave a conversation and they've said, wow, I feel better about myself after talking to Peter. That's become my new sort of marker of interpersonal success, if you will. I had to learn that the hard way.
Yeah, that's a beautiful thing. And I kind of have a similar thing too. And it's nice to hear that someone else kind of has put it together like that too. So addition to that, and regardless of if you believe in God, what is your definition of God?
Yeah, it's a great question. I've actually been, I'm such a geek. I've been watching PBS lately, their Nova program, because I am that cool. I grew up with like 7 TV channels. My parents would not get cable. And at the time I loathed them for it. And now I'm so grateful because what did I watch? PBS.
Yeah.
At like 7, I was like, oh, Frontline, this is great. Oh, wow, I'm learning all about the biopharma company, like industry. This is fantastic, right? And like, it made me really smart. So that's, I knew a lot about it, a lot about a lot. So where was I going with that? Oh, right, God. So I'm watching this Nova program the other day about Einstein's theory of relativity. Mm-hmm. And I never knew this, but if you take an object and accelerate it to the speed of light, then time slows or speeds up, depending on, whether you're the observer and standing still or you're the person at speed of light passing, whatever. I knew that part. But what I didn't know was that if you take an object and move it at speed of light away from you or towards you, their moment in time, their now, and your moment of time actually becomes dissociated.
Mhm.
So if Santiago's in a rocket ship moving really, really fast away from me, and I don't remember if it's away for one and towards for the other, so I'm going to get them confused, but let's say it this way. And you're moving away from me. If you and I pick an instant and think of the same thing at an instant, we're actually not in the same time.
Yeah.
Your now is could be 5 years ago, 50 years ago, 200 years ago, depending on how fast you're moving, because you're slicing through the space-time continuum in such a way that you've skewed literally the space-time fabric. You with me so far?
Yeah.
And in addition, if you ride towards me, again, I probably messed that up, but let's say it's towards me, you're actually slicing into my future. Your now is my future now, right? So if your brain isn't hurting already, for those of you listening out there, I had to rewind and watch that segment like 4 times to like finally like get like what they were talking about. And so if you believe in physics, this is what the math says. Right? It's not like theoretical. This is what the math says, that these things should be true. And so in that kind of situation, time is not like a river, a flowing river. It's like a frozen river, where at any point in time, we sort of already know what history looks like and what the future looks like, which means there has to be a future, and we already know what it is. It's talk about destiny and fate, which, by the way, I wasn't a huge proponent of, except I wrote, because again, I'm so cool, wrote an article in my high school paper one time. I've never told this story, by the way, about, because I was taking an advanced physics class, about the fact that if you take a human brain and you break it into its atoms, they're all physical processes, right? Like a synaptic electric firing, that's a physical process. A chemical process between brain cells, that's a physical process.
Yeah.
And we know how physical processes go. Like we can predict if you roll a bowling ball in one direction with this kind of a slope and those kinds of atmospheric weather conditions, we know what's going to happen, right? So if you apply that logic to us humans, we also should know what's going to occur. All of those physical properties that are literally rolling downhill should in some way, shape, or form be predestined. You follow?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So when you ask me, what's God, I have no idea. But what I do increasingly believe is that, kind of tie this back to luck, right? There are a lot of things that just flow through life that I think we struggle to understand, and we assign emotion to, and we try to control in ways that I think we, and I especially, I'll speak for myself, would do a lot better to just smile and look around and enjoy and be thankful and grateful and not worry so much. Mm-hmm. Because even if everything I said about physics isn't true, we can't control most of it anyway. That we can probably agree on. So, exactly. Is that God or not? I have no idea. But, I have to say one of my favorite shows is Westworld on HBO. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you watch Westworld.
Yeah.
Because it is the great existentialist tale of our time and really grapples with like, what is humanity and what is it to be alive and here and now? And how do you even define that? And those types of issues just fascinate me. Mm-hmm. And the reason I love them, Santiago, is because if I believe if more people spent more time thinking about that stuff, looking up at the stars, understanding that we're this, pale blue dot in the middle of a vast galaxy we don't understand, they'd probably be able to let go of a lot of the emotions they're feeling about their aunt's Facebook post or the president's tweet that really don't fucking matter. You know what I mean? I think we need a lot more perspective in this country and in this world.
Definitely. It's interesting that you bring up that paper that you wrote in high school, because my next question is free will an illusion? How is it, or is it not?
I don't know. Yeah, I'm still trying to, I think about that. It's a great question. I think it's probably an illusion. Mm-hmm. I think it probably is. And the fun part about that I love thinking about is there's no way to prove it. Because as soon as you think I have free will, then you can also think, was I always going to think I have free will in that moment of time, in that space? You know what I mean? So it's, I love mind fucks like that. It's wonderful.
No, definitely. How do you determine what good behavior is?
Oh, gosh. It's changed so much for me now, going back to like the empathy I've had to develop. I think good behavior is empathy.
Yeah.
I just did, so as part of my book launch, I picked 50 people that I really respected, and I put together a little package for them. There was an advanced copy of my book, and then a wine bottle planter that was recycled, that was engraved with their name, that you could like put together and put flowers in it, and it would become a planter. Really nice. And I wrote them a letter, and it's printed on seed paper, so you can like cut the paper up, plant it, and it grows into wildflowers. Like, very thoughtfully done. And just saying to them, hey, you've been an inspiration to me, and thank you for everything. And I'm reaching out because honestly, I need your help. I have no right to ask, but I really want and need help with this book. It's really important to me. It's about honesty. I know you value honesty. So, I hope you accept this book and at least, consider helping me. I can't tell you how many, so folks did get back and they're like, oh, wow, Peter, this is amazing. Thank you so much for thinking of me. This is wonderful. Other folks, a month went by, I followed up. Hey, did you get that? Did you receive it? Just let me know you received it. Yeah, I received it. Gosh, just, thanks. And so, I reached out to them cold. I have no right to be upset that they weren't, more excited about it. That's fine. But empathy, right? I mean, if someone had taken the time to mail me a box with a gift and a book and a cry for help, I would at least call them or email them, say, hey, I got this, super thoughtful. I'll put it on my shelf. Can't promise I'll read it right now, but it looks really awesome. And, if there's a way I find I can help you in the future, I will consider it, right?
Sure.
Just nice, right? Nice, thoughtful, empathetic. And I was really disappointed. And again, I have no right to be disappointed. I know that, but no right. But I did feel disappointed that they didn't have the empathy to take 3 seconds for the hours and hours of labor and thoughtfulness it took me. They couldn't take 60 seconds to write me an email. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So that comes down to values, right? What did I tell you? My highest value is service. One of my highest is service to others. So that would have crossed my mind. Whereas maybe their value isn't service to others, even though many of them say it's service to others. But again, back to self-honesty, there's what we say and what we put out on Instagram, and there's how we actually act. So
sure.
It was a little disappointing to me, but again, self-honesty, right? I have no right to be disappointed, but I was.
Sure. Yeah. How do we reduce the division?
Oh gosh, Santiago, did we book 8 hours? We have all that time to talk about?
I intentionally asked dense questions because the story is more important than the answer.
Well, this is an important question to me because what we're seeing in our society and culture right now in the United States is really disgusting. Mm-hmm. I mean, I am just blown away by the amount of ego, bias, and ignorance that my fellow Americans have adopted in recent years. And, folks sometimes love to blame social media. Listen, I hate social media too, but don't blame the technology for the psychology, and that's what's pissing me off about, right now folks are blaming Facebook because they're not doing enough to fact check, the president's posts, and they're allowing groups and stuff like that. It's like, I wish people would just take a moment and ask themselves, do we really want a corporation with a profit motive to be the ones deciding what's true and what's not and what we see? Are you kidding me? Mm-hmm. And then what are we going to do? We're going to stop these groups from marketing. When they're marketing on Facebook, we can all see what they're doing. We can have an open conversation about it. There's transparency. When we kick them off, what are they going to do? They're going to go underground where we can't see them, where they're going to cause more damage that we can't address, and have an open conversation about it. Right. People, think about what you're asking for. And what's shocking me is all these big brands that are jumping on this bandwagon to boycott them. I think, honestly, Santiago, that has more to do with getting good PR and looking good than being thoughtful about it. But I wish one brave one would think through this. And I think Mark Zuckerberg has. And I think that's why he's saying, like, listen, this isn't a good idea. I don't think it's laziness or that he doesn't care about society. I think he recognizes some of the things that I've said. Now, maybe that's not true. Mark, if you're listening to this, give me a call and you can tell me otherwise. But I certainly hope that's the case. So, back to division in our society, let's not blame the technology for the psychology. And as far as the psychology goes, somehow we've turned into a nation of rugged individualists. I mean, this whole thing about like, I don't have to wear a mask. You can't tell me to wear a mask. It's like, just shut up and put the mask on. I mean, listen, and I don't want to wear it either, you know, and there are certain situations. I mean, look, I went out to eat at a restaurant the other day. There are a bunch of people sitting down with no masks, right? We're, by the way, for anyone listening, we're in like July of 2020. So like right in the middle of the shit.
Sure.
So people sitting down at a restaurant outside, no masks. Sign at the door says, hey, you know, you got to put a mask on to be seated. So we have to put a mask on to walk to the table so we could take it off and be the same distance from everyone else who already has the mask off. Like there's so many things like that that don't make sense, that I think that's where people are getting like, well, this doesn't make any sense, so I'm not doing it. So fine, I don't want to do it either. But on the other hand, somewhere along the line, we lost touch of we. And I actually, you know, I partly blame the rugged individualists who have taken that tact, but I actually don't think it's their fault. And I think it's the fault of the public and private sector that has routinely, over many decades and even centuries, screwed the public over, screwed their employees over, screwed their suppliers, their vendors, their taxpayers. There are so many things that the government has done, make no sense, serve no people, you know, enrich corporations, blah, 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 on and on, right? I'm not a political guy, so I don't know enough about it to speak intelligently about it. I will admit that. But I can say there have been plenty of historical, you know, remember I watched PBS as a kid, plenty of historical, you know, situations in which the leaders, public, private sector, whatever, didn't take care of the people. And now I think we're seeing those chickens come home to roost, where we're asking people, hey, we're in a crisis here, will you help? And they're like, no, we won't. Because we don't know if you're telling us the truth or not. You know, we don't know what your agenda is. We don't trust you. And when you have dishonesty and a lack of transparency, you have distrust. And when you have distrust, you cannot take unified action as a community. Now, there's a failure on a couple different sides here. One is our leaders from the beginning should have been much more transparent about what was going on. Like, hey, there's this virus. We don't know anything about it yet. As we know, you will know. But these are the steps we all need you to take. We know it sucks. We're going to try our best here. And here's the strategy and here's the plan. We're all going to do it together. Like that would have been great. Yeah.
Right.
But as you and I both know, it wasn't that. It was mayhem and it was governors running off in different directions and it was rugged individualism, right? So failure on that end. Failure on the other end is folks taking that as a hall pass. Well, you all don't know what's going on, so I'm just going to ignore everything and go party in Lake of the Ozarks, right? Mm-hmm. Also probably not a good idea. And I wish folks had a lot more of we thinking. Because if we thought like we, then we wouldn't have things like, you know, massive racial discrimination and gender bias and all these things that don't create a culture, a peaceful society. Mm-hmm. We know that. So everything that someone does that feeds into one of those terrible, you know, things we have going on in society, they know in the back of their minds, unless they're complete morons, which I don't think they are, that the actions they're taking are harmful to the group. Mm-hmm. And so we can only then ask, what are their justifications, right? Somewhere in their minds, they have figured out a way to justify their beliefs and their actions. And the question is, how do we shake those people? There was a wonderful story several years ago of a man who was like outwardly racist, like former underground KKK member, the whole 9 yards. He was forced through some mechanism, I don't remember what it was, to have to confront a black neighbor face to face in a very intimate setting, you know, something like they were both hospitalized in the same room, something like that. Mm-hmm. And through discovering the humans behind each other, they formed an incredible bond and an incredible friendship. It took that transformative and very human experience to bring these people together and to help them understand, particularly, you know, this former KKK member, understand where he had gone wrong. Now, as I'm telling this story, Santiago, this probably makes sense to you, right? So yeah, that's how people get to know each other and get over their whatever bullshit's going on in their head, right? It makes them hate other people. Who has time to hate other people? That's what I want to know. Who has the time to be discriminatory against? I just don't get it. Anyway, now we know that. Now look at like the protests going on for Black Lives Matter. Okay. Now, the risk of sounding controversial. Let's ask ourselves, do those protests work? Well, what have they done? They've created news coverage that doesn't stop. They've created dangerous situations for the coronavirus. They've created lots of police officers and National Guards people having to stay up all night and work all day and put themselves in danger. Mm-hmm. Now, I really do hope, Santiago, that those protests create change. But something else that they're doing is making a lot of people not pissed off, but just sort of sick and tired of it, right? It's like causing a traffic jam on the highway. Like, please get off the highway. I have a life to live. And I don't think that's just say those folks are like, I don't care about this. I think it's something disruptive, right? Now, on the one hand, seems like kind of a logical thing to do. I mean, we need to wake up about this. I mean, the murder of George Floyd, horrendous. I wrote an article on Medium about the fact that like I'm not going to speak for Black people. I'm not Black. I have no right, but I am going to speak for white people. Say, hey, white people, wake the hell up. You know, we need to do something and take action. Now, we've tried protests in the past, haven't we? You know, I didn't live through the 60s. I've seen the footage, right? We've tried this. Has it worked? I don't think so. And I believe the reason it hasn't worked is because when we do something like go into a protest that turns into, a rager where we smash small business doors and windows off, we miss the whole point of the story I told about the former KKK member, which is this is about humanization. If we don't humanize these issues, we will never overcome them. That's how we humans work. As soon as we assemble into a faceless mob that we can take a side on, right? Whether they're effective or not, hey, look what that mob is doing. Isn't that awful? We can't see the people behind those masks. I think it's actually more damaging. What I would much rather see is some sort of forced coming together at the community level, at the local level, town by town, neighborhood by neighborhood, saying, we're going to all get together and talk about this.
Yeah.
Because we're all neighbors here. And if we don't get to the people behind these movements, then we're never going to have that connectivity, that develop that empathy that we talked about. So for me, I worry that some of the directions that we're taking to make change aren't being completely honest about the way people change and how they change, and what it takes to change. Because listen, if protests worked, then after everything that happened in the 60s, we should look very different, shouldn't we? Yeah. So what I'd hate to see is a society that continues being divided because we keep trying to do the same shit that doesn't create the change that we want to change. But Lord, do we need to change? I mean, that is clear and obvious.
Beautiful. I think this one's just going to have to run long. So this is fine because I'm loving everything that you're saying. So because I like to start dark and then move up. So one more dark question. Do you believe humans are evil by nature?
I believe so. What's funny is when I started on the book journey, somebody asked me, and this was like years ago, because it took me 4 years to write that stupid book, by the way. Somebody asked me, do you believe everyone's fundamentally honest? And at the time I said, yeah, I think so. Now I know that the answer is no. People are fundamentally dishonest, not in the way that they intend, not that they're intentionally lying to people, but in the way that they get caught up in the dishonesty in their own minds that they can't even see. Everything we've talked about, right? Self-limiting beliefs, biases, ego. So are people inherently evil? No, I don't believe that. And the reason I don't believe that is because nobody walks around, unless you're like some terrible, criminal, rapist, whatever, right? Very few people walk around thinking, wow, what a terrible person I am and what terrible decisions I make. And what most people walk around thinking, wow, what a great person I am. And I make good decisions and I think the right way. That's why we're thinking that way and making those decisions, right? Yeah. So, because if we move from that point, if we assume that's true, maybe it's not, but if we assume that's true, then we have to make other assumptions, which is how do you not change a person from evil to good, but change them from thinking they're right to thinking they're wrong, helping them understand what's right. And of course, what's right is subjective, right? It's not an absolute scale. It's the helping people understand where they may be going astray. That's the hardest part. because of what we talked about earlier. The folks who think they are most right and righteous and self-aware are sadly typically the worst and the least.
Sure.
So again, that can't happen. I have found that can't happen without an extreme amount of vulnerability. Back to get the interpersonal feelings going, get people in a room. Because as soon as there's vulnerability on the table, most folks recognize it and they respect it. What do we say when someone comes and says to you, listen, I'm sorry. It turns out I'm a terrible person. I want to be better and I'm going to try to be better. And here's what I'm going to do to be better. You don't like stomp on them, you like crush their feelings, right? You say, well, thank you for your honesty. I respect that. And in the same way, if we could learn to be vulnerable with others, imagine a situation where we put someone who's been subjected to racism in a room with a bunch of folks, and that person simply tells their story, the emotions. Say, this is what happened to me. This is the way it made me feel. This is why it made me feel less than human. This is why it made me feel what? That's going to be a powerful experience, a tear-inducing experience, and a memorable one that reaches us where it matters, in our amygdala, where the emotions live, where our memories are tied to emotion, so we can empathize and understand. So I know I've kind of come full circle on your evil question, but I don't think people are inherently evil. I think we don't do a good enough job understanding, honestly, how people construct their version of themselves, how they cling to it, and what it takes for them to move off of it. And I think as soon as we can be more honest about those things, I would hope we would change the way in which we try to make change, to bring that full circle.
Definitely. So then moving upwards, what are you optimistic about for our future?
So I really do believe that in a world where everyone is recording first-party data, where we know what people said, right? Where we can see George Floyd's murder with our own eyes, it is going to become... Why? Ask yourself, when cameras are rolling, when we know what happens, what incentive is there to lie, cheat, steal, murder, whatever? I think the incentives will fall away. Not to say some bad apples will still do terrible things. I mean, those cops knew people were recording them and did it anyway. That, to me, as someone who talks about honesty and transparency, is the most shocking. And so there's still going to be some bad people. Evil people, I don't know. Bad people, yes. But in a world where, the corporate scandal is going to come out, Jeffrey Epstein's story was going to come out, it's all going to come out. I think the incentives to do anything but be honest and transparent will fall away. And that, I believe, will in turn create at least a more transparent and hopefully better society to live in.
Yeah, definitely. Then what makes you content?
About society or about my life?
No, just yourself. What makes you feel content?
What's weird? I love, one of the best feelings is just making my to-do list and checking it off and knowing that I did it and moving all the pegs forward. I've always thought of my life as like a chessboard. I want to make sure all the pieces go one peg forward. I know that's not how you play chess, by the way, but I'm mixing analogies. It's I've got businesses here and personal stuff here and my marriage over there and my family. I want to move every peg forward, just make it one click better every day, every month, every year. That's what makes me content. Know that I'm moving in the right direction. I'm learning and I'm growing and not getting caught in my own bullshit.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing. When will you be satisfied?
Never. Haven't you watched Hamilton? You know the song I'm talking about?
Yeah, Satisfied.
Yeah. Never.
What advice do you have for people in general?
Stop worrying. As my business partner says, worry doesn't solve anything. I've been a victim of worrying myself. There was never any reason to worry. There's no reason to worry now because it doesn't help. In fact, it hurts. When we're busy worrying about what we can't control, we often don't do the things we can control.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think if people just stop to think about that and then make the changes they can control, they would be a lot better off.
Beautiful. And lastly, potentially the most important, cake or pie?
Both.
Beautiful. Peter, thank you so much for doing this with me.
Of course. It's my pleasure. I love doing these.
Where can we find you and your things?
So come have an honest conversation with me. I'm at honest2greatness.com. That's my main site. I have my fingers in a lot of pies. I have entrepreneurial ADHD. I think we talked about that. So I have a free honesty quiz that you can take at honest2greatness.com. I have a free Facebook group for aspiring writers. I'm doing live streams every Thursday teaching you how to go from how to figure out what idea you want to write about all the way up to how do you get an agent, a publisher, endorsements, the whole 9 yards. Come join us there. I have tons of awesome programs for entrepreneurs. My favorite is Forum, which is a confidential monthly meeting that we have with a group of other founders where we remove those self-limiting pieces of bullshit and get to what's really, really going on behind the scenes, personal, business, and family. That's an incredibly powerful and life-changing program. All of those things you can find on my website. If you actually go to peterkozodoy.com/go, I've put all those links in one place to make it a little easier for you.
Beautiful. Great. Yeah. And I mean, there's also TED Talks and all that other stuff, which I enjoyed your TED Talk.
That old thing.
Yeah. But no, yeah, it's been a great time, and I'm happy to have connected with you. So,
of course, man, my pleasure.
Yeah. I'm Santiago Ramones.
Peter Kozodoy.
You can find everything that I do on my website, santiagoramones.com. I make music. Bloom is available now, streaming everywhere. Put it on in the background, put it on your workout playlist, show it to your friends so you can all enjoy it together. You can also buy the thing and get bonus content to get a bit deep into the emotions you can feel with it. I also make music with Power Cycle, an experimental electronic trio. Our first completely improvised album, Too Many Damn Cables, is streaming everywhere. More to come from Power Cycle in the future. To support this podcast, leave reviews, comments, tell your friends about it, and buy my music, because by supporting me, you're supporting the podcast. I always end the podcast with my 3 things. They shape my life philosophy. Those 3 things are: love never fails, it's going to be okay, I might be wrong.